back there. Follow the road. Look for these signs along the course out there.
All right, welcome to Life with Cue Ball and the microphone this time. Here we are at the Biosphere 2, just outside Tucson. Where you have me and a trusty companion to give you this action-packed, exciting tour of the Biosphere 2. Notice how interesting it looks. Yes, it looks like a sidewalk and a trellis. Woohoo. Be alert, there's wildlife. Got them to turn around, look. Tour stop 101.
Not only does Biosphere 2 have an amazing history, but so does the property. We are nestled here at the base of the Santa Catalina Mountains and on the edge of the Sonoran Desert. The property has been inhabited for thousands of years, initially by indigenous people. And then in the 1920s, it was homesteaded by Dr. Lackey, a dentist in Tucson, who ran a small cattle ranch and hunting lodge. Then, in 1957, Lady Margaret of Sumter purchased the property. She built a Spanish-style home on the eastern end, complete with servant quarters and a pool. And then she sold the property to the Motorola Corporation, who continued to build out the infrastructure. That included a 27-room hotel, a restaurant, as well as a 120-seat auditorium for executive training sessions, and also for the facility to act as a retreat. After that, by virtue of a acquired the property in the late 70s. They continued to operate the facility as an executive training center and retreat. And in 1984, they sold the property to Space Biosphere Ventures, who continued to build out the infrastructure and built Biosphere 2.
Each stop has a video.
So, are these like little rooms?
Probably like little training things. Maybe when
Be nosy. It's got like a kitchen.
can you stay at the Biosphere?
Yes, you can stay in Biosphere. Stay where you can. Educational programming,
Look how they paint the arrow way, way over here. Well, I guess there is a sign.
Over here you can see the test module, which was used as a prototype prior to building Biosphere 2. Next to that are the greenhouses that they used to quarantine plants and animals prior to putting them inside the facility. And then the analytical lab, which is where they used stored instrumentation and took water and soil samples. And then directly behind me here in the Arch building is the former mission control. This is where people monitored everything happening inside when the Biospherians lived in Biosphere 2.
Follow the red arrows. Wood, salt, iron dust, basalt sand, marble dust, copper, charcoal, mica, plaster, paint. Tracing ancient oceans. I didn't even notice the sculptures over there. One pile. Active rainwater harvesting system. Which I guess would be currently inactive since there is no rain. This must be a piece of the glass.
In 1987, they broke ground for Biosphere. Remarkable in 4 years to build this over 3-acre facility, complete with a tropical rainforest, an ocean, savanna, marsh, a desert, an agricultural area, and a living quarters. Just like our houses, they had complete kitchen, dining area, apartments, bathrooms, workout facilities. Environment that they hoped they would be able to live inside. They successfully did for 2 years. Now they faced some challenges, as one might expect. Just like anybody who's confined to spaces, they face social environments. The farm area wasn't as productive as they hoped. It did not give them the adequate calories or nutritional standpoint. supported a very diverse and abundant microbial communities. Those microbes are just like you and I. They take in oxygen, they give off CO2. Well, it was that respiration that outpaced plant photosynthesis. Remember, photosynthesis takes in CO2, water, splits it, and gives off oxygen, which we use to breathe. Well, that balance wasn't quite right inside Biosphere 2, and it dropped down to nearly 14.2%. Outside is 21%. Inside Biosphere 2 at about 5 per day, 500 of this 2-year mission. They ended up, because they felt that it was needed for the safety of the biosphereans, adding oxygen into the system. In doing so, though, one of the big mistakes, in my opinion, was they were not forthcoming with this. And in fact, they did not tell the public that they had to do so. And this was a project that was so widely and highly publicized. They had to retract some statements. And we all know what happens when you do those types of things. It's very difficult to recovery. And as a result, they lost tremendous amounts of credibility, not only with the scientific community, but with the media and the public. But they did successfully complete the 2-year mission. They had a short intermission, and then another group, this time of 7 versus 8, were sealed inside Biosphere 2, but only for about 6 months. It was at this time that the original ownership group decided that they were going to transition the facility away from a human habitation experiment and more towards an earth and environmental science experiment with the help of Columbia University. So they began a partnership with Columbia University. Columbia University officially took over management in January of 1996 and began to build out and repurpose Biosphere 2 so it could be used more formally as an earth and environmental science laboratory. About
What you're looking at here is human habitat. This is where the Biosphereans had their apartments, their kitchen, and some of their laboratories. At the very top here is the library. This provided them a 360-degree view of the horizon. The Biosphereans rarely use the library due to the long spiral staircase that it took to get up to the top. Over here is the original airlock door. This is where the Biosphereans entered and exited the facility.
This is an example of an experiment here at Biosphere 2 where we have integrated the harvesting of electricity and energy with the growing of agricultural crops. Now this layout and system is hugely beneficial for both. And what I mean by that is that these plants, they transpire, they give off water. That water goes up into the underside of the panels, actually cools the panels. Keeping them cooler means that they're more efficient. Crops. It extends their growing season and also protects them from the elements, which means the crops have a more favorable growing situation throughout the entire year. Here at Biosphere 2, we are very concerned with the ideas of food, energy, water, and health. Behind me is a prime example of a new technology that is designed to improve the efficiency of solar collection. Not only from the level of just the solar collection, around 30%, but also the heat collection. Now you have a system that is nearly that you can use that electricity to generate power, but alternatively you can take that heat and use it in hot water room, or you can use some equipment like an absorption unit.
What it was like to be a Biosphere.
Bad cooks learn fast because ruined or burned meals could not be replaced with efficient ingredients. Once it running days, each crew member cooks for everyone.
This is the original.
Shall we go this way?
About that, the restroom's got a shower in there.
There are 10 apartments in the human habitat. Each Biospherean had his or her own two-story apartment. The living room was downstairs and the bedroom was upstairs. Each crew member decorated their apartment to their own personal taste. Some became libraries, while others, like the one you see through the window, became an artist's studio. Personal privacy was very important to the Biosphereans. Their apartments became their castles. Contact by phone and computer to family and friends in the outside world made the isolation a little easier to endure.
Observatory, and you're looking at the world's largest laboratory Earth science experiment. What this experiment does is it tries to answer important questions like, when it rains in the mountains, how much of that drinking water actually makes it to our aquifers and our supplies for us to use? And you would think that's common knowledge, but it's actually surprisingly not well known. Behind me, you'll see one of 3 large hill slope landscapes. And these landscapes were designed to be able to study the underground movement of water extremely well. The way we do that is that we've submerged thousands of sensors that can measure water, they can measure gas, and other properties of the soil subsurface. We've buried those sensors into the ground, built our landscape around those sensors, and now we can use a sprinkler system to rain across our landscape and track and measure where that water goes and how it moves under the surface of the landscape. As you look out over these landscapes, what you'll see is a black volcanic material. This is called basalt, and it's actually common across many of our landscapes on Earth. You can also find basalt on other planets like Mars. On top of that dark material, you're going to see some signs of life. Most prominently is these large mats of moss. And that moss is an early stage successional species of the landscape. It's found a home, and what it's doing is pulling nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fixing it into the basalt soil. That soil gets enriched and actually becomes more fertile and more supportive of all life, including plants. The next successional stage of this experiment involves adding plants. And we'll be adding grasses, alfalfa, and perhaps even trees like mesquite to investigate how plant roots and plants as a whole start to alter the hydrology of the landscape. And this leads back to that question about how our drinking water moves through landscapes.
Why? Look at what's growing in the biosphere. Cue balls growing in the biosphere. Ooh. It's off there. Going down. It's weird that that top stair is even with the landing. Like, throws you off a little bit. Is there theater part of this thing? Yes. Got red air, huh?
Biosphere 2 is a living laboratory where scientists examine interactions in a controlled environment. You can't put the entire Amazon rainforest under glass and control it, but the rainforest in Biosphere 2 is contained, so you can manipulate the water and temperature conditions to conduct experiments on the entire ecosystem.
Here in the rainforest, we do a lot of research looking at how do tropical forests respond to climate change. And we do that in response to increasing in carbon dioxide, because that happens with climate change, increasing temperature, and increasing drought. This tower behind me has sensors for temperature and humidity and for light, so that we actually can understand those conditions as they change. With that, we know the growing conditions every 15 minutes for these plants at the locations that are at, so in great detail. Now that's above ground. We also need to know that below ground, especially when we do droughts. Where do the trees get their water from, and what are the conditions? And so we can look all the way down to the bottom to actually measure where the water comes from. That also gives us the possibility to actually put tracers in the water and then see which trees take up the water, either at the top and the bottom. Those kind of questions.
All right, now let's get to Matt's conspiracies.
There are 5 very different biomes under glass in Biosphere 2, including the tropical.
The melting ice caps
The ocean
and the rising sea levels.
700,000 gallons of salt water, with a new wave
Where does it come from? Where did it go? It's all still the same amount, isn't it? It's just switched its location. Also, possibly, probably, due to the fact that the Earth's axis slowly shifts. So then the hemisphere